Maria Santos had worked at Brightfield Industries for 23 years. She started when she was just 19, a young woman fresh from high school with no college degree and no fancy connections. Back then, the company was small, just a local business that made cleaning products for homes and offices. She began as a janitor, cleaning the floors and emptying trash cans after everyone else had gone home. Over the years, Maria watched the company grow. She saw new buildings go up. She watched young executives come and go. She cleaned their offices and listened to their conversations. Most of them never noticed her. To them, she was invisible, just another cleaning lady pushing a cart down the hallway. But Maria was not invisible. She had eyes that saw everything and ears that heard everything. More importantly, she had a mind that remembered everything. She knew which products sold well and which ones sat on shelves collecting dust. She knew which customers complained and which ones kept coming back. She knew all of this because she cleaned the offices where these reports were left on desks, where conversations happened behind doors that were never fully closed. When Maria was 30, the company promoted her to floor supervisor. She was now in charge of the entire cleaning staff. It was not a fancy title, and the pay increase was small. But Maria was proud. She had worked hard. And someone had finally noticed. 10 more years passed. Maria became the head of maintenance and facilities. She managed not just the cleaning staff, but also the people who fixed things when they broke. She knew every corner of every building. She knew where the pipes ran and where the electrical wires connected. She knew the building better than anyone, including the engineers who had designed it. Now, at 42, Maria was still in the same position. Her hair had some gray in it now, and her hands were rough from years of hard work. She wore simple clothes, usually plain pants, and a company polo shirt. She never wore makeup, and her only jewelry was a small gold cross that her mother had given her before she passed away. The company had changed a lot in 23 years. It was now called Brightfield Global Industries, and it had offices in 12 countries. The cleaning products business had expanded into industrial chemicals, home goods, and even some technology products. The company employed over 5,000 people, and its headquarters was a tall glass building in the center of the city. But despite all this growth, Maria noticed that something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, like the smell of a storm before it arrives. People seemed worried. Meetings happened more often, and they lasted longer. Executives walked through the hallways with tight faces and sharp words. Papers were left on desks with red marks and question marks. Maria could read those papers, even though no one thought she could. She had taught herself to understand business reports by watching and listening for years. She knew that sales were falling. She knew that customers were unhappy. She knew that a big problem was coming. One cold morning in November, Maria arrived at work earlier than usual. She liked coming in early when the building was quiet and empty. It gave her time to check on things before the chaos of the day began. As she walked down the executive hallway on the top floor, she noticed that the lights were on in the main conference room. This was unusual. Nobody ever used that room this early. The big meetings always happened in the afternoon after lunch, when the executives had finished their morning coffee and read their morning emails. Maria pushed her cart slowly toward the conference room. The door was slightly open, and she could hear voices inside. She stopped her cart and pretended to straighten some cleaning supplies while she listened. "We need to make a decision," a man's voice said. It was deep and frustrated. Maria recognized it as Mr. Bradley Thompson, the chief executive officer. He was a tall man with silver hair and expensive suits. He had been CEO for 5 years, brought in from a bigger company to make Brightfield successful. The Evergreen contract is our biggest one, another voice said. This was Mrs. Diana Wells, the chief financial officer. She had a sharp voice that always sounded like she was angry, even when she was happy. If we lose it, we lose 30% of our revenue. I understand the numbers, Diana, Mr. Thompson replied. What I need are solutions, not reminders of how bad things are. The products are fine, a third voice said. Maria knew this voice, too. It belonged to Mr. Robert Chun, the vice president of product development. He was a young man, not even 40 yet, with fancy degrees from fancy schools. Evergreen is being unreasonable. They want us to lower our prices by 15% while keeping the same quality. It's impossible. Maria stood very still, listening. She had heard about the Evergreen problem. Evergreen Corporation was a huge company that bought cleaning products from Brightfield and resold them to hotels, hospitals, and schools across the country. They were by far Brightfield's biggest customer. Maybe we should just give them what they want, Mrs. Wells said. We can cut costs somewhere else. Reduce staff. Shut down one of the factories. If we do that, the quality will suffer, Mr. Chun argued. And if the quality suffers, we'll lose Evergreen anyway. Plus, every other customer we have. Then what do you suggest? Mr. Thompson asked. His voice was getting louder now. Should we just sit here and watch the company fall apart? There was silence in the room. Maria knew that silence. It was the silence of people who had no answers. She continued down the hallway, pushing her cart past the conference room door. Through the gap, she caught a glimpse of the room. There was a long table with about 15 people sitting around it. She recognized most of them. Executives and department heads and managers. They all had laptops open in front of them and papers spread across the table. None of them looked at her as she passed. None of them ever did. Maria went about her morning work, checking the bathrooms on each floor, making sure the cleaning staff knew their assignments for the day, ordering supplies that were running low. But her mind kept returning to what she had heard in that conference room. She thought about Evergreen. She remembered cleaning the office of Mr. James Miller, the account manager who handled the Evergreen relationship. She remembered seeing papers on his desk, complaints from Evergreen about product packaging that was hard to open, about delivery schedules that were always late, about customer service representatives who were rude on the phone. She also remembered something else. 3 years ago, she had been cleaning the storage room in the basement when she discovered a box of old files. Curious, she had looked through them. They were from the early days of the company, before the big growth, before the fancy They were notes written by Mr. Harold Brightfield himself, the founder of the company. Mr. Brightfield had started the company in his garage 50 years ago. He had sold his products door to door, talking to housewives and janitors and hotel managers. His notes were full of simple wisdom about how to keep customers happy. He wrote about listening more than talking, about fixing problems before they became big, about treating every customer like they were the only customer in the world. Maria had kept those files in her desk. She did not know why. Something told her they might be important someday. As the day went on, Maria watched the executives hurry back and forth between meetings. Their faces grew more worried. Their voices grew more sharp. By afternoon, word had spread through the building that a major meeting was scheduled for the next day. All senior leadership would attend. The future of the company would be decided. Maria finished her shift and went home to her small apartment. She lived alone now. Her husband had died 5 years ago, and her children had grown up and moved to other cities. She had a quiet life, cooking simple meals, watching television in the evenings, calling her grandchildren on the weekends. But that night, she could not stop thinking about the company. Brightfield had been her home for more than half her life. The people there were her family, even if they did not know it. The thought of the company failing, of people losing their jobs, of everything falling apart, it made her heart heavy. She went to her closet and found a box of things from work. Inside were the old files from Mr. Brightfield. She sat at her kitchen table and read through them again, page by page. The answers were all there. Simple answers that the fancy executives had forgotten, or maybe had never known. Maria made a decision. She would go to that meeting tomorrow. She did not know how she would get in. She did not know if anyone would listen, but she had to try. She stayed up late that night, writing down her thoughts in a notebook. Her handwriting was simple and clear. Her words were plain and direct. She did not use big business words or complicated charts. She just wrote what she knew, what she had learned in 23 years of watching and listening. When she finally went to bed, it was past midnight, but for the first time in weeks, Maria felt something like hope. The next morning, Maria put on her best clothes. They were not fancy, just a clean pair of black pants and a blue blouse that her daughter had given her for Christmas. She took extra care with her hair, brushing it back and pinning it neatly. She put on the small gold cross, like she always did, and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked like what she was. A simple woman who worked hard and kept things clean. She did not look like an executive or a consultant or anyone important, but looks could be deceiving. Maria knew that better than anyone. She arrived at work an hour early and went straight to her desk in the basement. She gathered the old files from Mr. Brightfield and put them in a folder. She added her notebook with her own notes. Then she sat and waited for the meeting to begin. At 10 o'clock, she took the elevator to the top floor. The executive hallway was crowded with people walking toward the main conference room. They were all dressed in expensive suits and carrying leather briefcases. They talked in low, serious voices. Maria walked toward the conference room door. A young man in a suit stood outside, holding a clipboard. He was checking names and letting people in. "I need to go into the meeting," Maria said. The young man looked at her with confusion. He glanced at her simple clothes and her rough hands. "I'm sorry, but this meeting is for senior leadership only. It's closed to other staff." "I understand," Maria said, "but I have important information. Please, I just need 5 minutes." The young man shook his head. "Ma'am, I can't let you in. This is a very important meeting. Only invited people can attend." Maria stood there, not sure what to do. She had come so far, but now she could not get through the door. Years of being invisible had not prepared her for this moment. Just then, the door opened and a woman stepped out. It was Mrs. Helen Parker, the Vice President of Human Resources. She was an older woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice. Maria had cleaned her office many times and had always found it to be the most organized and pleasant of all the executive offices. "Is there a problem here?" Mrs. Parker asked. "This woman wants to come into the meeting," the young man said, "but she's not on the list." Mrs. Parker looked at Maria. There was a moment of recognition in her eyes. You're Maria, aren't you? From facilities? Yes, ma'am, Maria said. I know I shouldn't be here, but I have something important to say about Evergreen. About how to fix things. Mrs. Parker studied Maria for a long moment. Something in Maria's face must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. Come with me, she said. Maria followed Mrs. Parker into the conference room. It was a large room with windows that looked out over the city. The long table was full of people, all of them turning to look at the newcomers. Mr. Thompson sat at the head of the table. When he saw Maria, his eyebrows went up. Helen? Who is this? This is Maria Santos, Mrs. Parker said. She's the head of facilities. She has something she wants to share with us. Head of facilities. Mr. Thompson repeated. His voice was not unfriendly, but it was clearly confused. This is a meeting about strategic partnerships and revenue projections. With all due respect, what could facilities contribute to this discussion? A few people around the table smiled or chuckled softly. Maria felt her face grow warm, but she did not look away. I understand your concern, Mr. Thompson, Maria said. Her voice was quiet but steady. I know I don't look like I belong here. I clean floors and fix broken pipes. But I have worked at this company for 23 years. I have seen things, I have heard things, and I have some ideas that might help. Mr. Thompson glanced at the other executives. Some of them shook their heads slightly. Others looked bored or impatient. The company was in crisis, and now they had to listen to the cleaning lady? Maria, Mr. Thompson said, I appreciate your loyalty to the company. But we have consultants and analysts working on this problem. We have experts with decades of experience in corporate strategy. I'm not sure what you could add that they haven't already considered. Maria felt the weight of his words. She felt the eyes of everyone in the room, looking at her like she was something that did not belong, like a stain on an expensive carpet. But she also felt the notebook in her hands, the folder with Mr. Brightfield's old notes. She thought about all the years she had spent watching and learning. All the times she had seen problems that the executives could not see because they were too busy looking at their computers. Please, she said. Just 5 minutes. If what I say is useless, I'll leave and never bother you again. But if I'm right, you might save this company. There was a long silence. Then, surprisingly, it was Mrs. Wells who spoke. Let her talk, the CFO said. 5 minutes isn't going to change anything. And honestly, none of us have any better ideas right now. Mr. Thompson sighed. Fine. 5 minutes. He gestured toward an empty chair at the far end of the table. Sit down and say what you have to say. Maria walked to the chair and sat down. She could feel her heart beating fast, but she forced herself to breathe slowly. She had spent 23 years being invisible. Now, for the first time, everyone was looking at her. She opened her folder and placed Mr. Brightfield's old notes on the table. Before I start, she said, I want to tell you about something I found a few years ago. These are notes from Mr. Harold Brightfield, the man who started this company. He wrote them when the company was just beginning, when he was selling products door to door. We've all read the company history, Mr. Chun said. It's on the website. Maybe, Maria said, but have you read his actual words? His thoughts about how to treat customers? His ideas about what makes a product good? She picked up one of the pages and read aloud. A customer is not a number on a spreadsheet. A customer is a person with needs and problems. If you solve their problems, they will give you their loyalty. If you ignore their problems, they will find someone else who listens. The room was quiet. Maria looked up and saw that a few people were paying attention now. Really paying attention. I know why Evergreen is unhappy, Maria said. And it's not about the price of our products. Mr. Thompson leaned forward. What do you mean? Maria took a deep breath. I clean the offices on every floor of this building. I see the papers that are left on desks. I hear the conversations in the hallways. I know that Evergreen has been complaining for over a year about things that have nothing to do with price. She pulled out a piece of paper from her folder. Their main complaint is about packaging. The containers for our industrial cleaners are hard to open and hard to pour. Workers in hotels and hospitals have to struggle with them every day. This wastes time and makes them frustrated. We've looked at the packaging, Mr. Chun said. Our engineers say it's fine. Your engineers don't use the products, Maria said. I do. I've used these products for 23 years. The new containers that you introduced 2 years ago are harder to handle than the old ones. The caps are too tight. The spouts clog easily. I've heard workers in this very building complain about them. She saw Mr. Chun's face change slightly. He looked uncomfortable now. The second problem is delivery, Maria continued. Evergreen orders are almost always late. Not by much, just a day or two. But when a hospital runs out of cleaning supplies, even one day matters. I know this because I've seen the delivery reports. I've heard the customer service calls. Those are operational issues, Mrs. Wells said. They shouldn't affect a major contract negotiation. But they do, Maria said. Because Evergreen doesn't trust us anymore. When a customer doesn't trust you, they look for any reason to leave. They say it's about price because that's the easiest thing to measure. But really, it's about respect. They feel like we don't care about them. The room was silent now. Maria looked around at the faces of the Some of them looked skeptical. Some looked thoughtful. And some, just a few, looked like they were starting to understand. Mr. Thompson rubbed his chin. Assuming you're right about these issues, what do you suggest we do about them? Maria opened her notebook. I have some ideas, she said. Simple ideas. They won't cost much money, but they might make a big difference. She looked around the room and saw that she had their attention. The invisible woman was no longer invisible. For the first time in 23 years, people were actually listening. First, Maria said, we need to fix the packaging. I know our engineers think it's fine, but they're wrong. The old containers from 5 years ago were better. They were simpler. Go back to that design, or something close to it. Mr. Chun started to speak, but Maria held up her hand. I'm not finished. My 5 minutes isn't over yet. A few people around the table smiled at that. Even Mr. Thompson had a small grin on his face. Second, Maria continued, we need to fix our delivery system. The problem isn't the trucks or the warehouses. The problem is communication. When orders are going to be late, nobody calls the customer to tell them. They just wait and hope nobody notices. But customers always notice. A simple phone call warning them about a delay would make a big difference. She turned a page in her notebook. Third, and this is the most important thing. We need to visit Evergreen, not to negotiate or argue about prices. Just to listen. Send someone there who will walk around their facilities, talk to their workers, and understand how they use our products. Mr. Brightfield used to do this himself before the company got big. He called it walking in the customer's shoes. That would take time, Mrs. Wells said. Time we don't have! How much time do you have if you lose the contract? Maria asked. How much time will you spend looking for new customers to replace 30% of your revenue? Mrs. Wells had no answer for that. Maria closed her notebook and looked around the room. I know I'm not an expert. I don't have a degree in business or finance. I've never negotiated a big contract, but I've spent my whole life watching how things work, paying attention to details that other people ignore. And I know that sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. She pointed to Mr. Brightfield's old notes on the table. This company was built on simple principles. Treat customers with respect. Listen to their problems. Make products that work well and are easy to use. Somewhere along the way, we forgot those principles. We got too big, too complicated. We started looking at spreadsheets instead of looking at people. The room was completely quiet now. Maria felt suddenly tired, like she had used up all her energy in these few minutes. That's all I have to say, she finished. You can do what you want with it, but I hope you'll at least think about it before you make any big decisions. She started to stand up, ready to leave. But Mr. Thompson raised his hand. Wait, he said. Sit down, please. Maria sat back in her chair, surprised. She looked at the CEO and saw something in his eyes that she had not expected. It looked like respect. Robert, Mr. Thompson said, turning to the VP of Product Development. What she said about the packaging, is it true? Have there been complaints? Mr. Chun shifted uncomfortably in his seat. There have been some comments in customer feedback surveys, he admitted, but the engineering team assured us that the new design was more cost-effective. We saved money on materials. And did anyone ask the customers if they'd preferred saving money over ease of use? Mr. Thompson asked. Mr. Chun did not answer. Mr. Thompson turned to another executive, a man named Michael Torres, who was in charge of operations. Michael, what about the delivery delays? How often are we late on evergreen orders? Mr. Torres pulled up something on his laptop, looking at the past 6 months. About 12% of orders were delayed by more than 24 hours. And how many of those customers received advance notice of the delay? Mr. Torres checked his computer again. His face fell. According to our records, less than 3% received any communication about delays. Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. He looked around the room at his executive team. We have consultants charging us $500 an hour to analyze our business. We have analysts with MBA degrees running projections and building models. And a woman who cleans our floors just told us more about our actual problems in 5 minutes than all of them combined. He turned back to Maria. Mrs. Santos, I owe you an apology. When you walked through that door, I assumed you had nothing to offer. I was wrong! Maria did not know what to say. She had expected to be dismissed, laughed at, or ignored. She had not expected this. The question now, Mr. Thompson continued, is what we do about it? He looked at his team. I want a task force formed today. I want someone to review our packaging design, not engineers alone, but actual users of the products. I want a new communication protocol for delivery delays, and I want someone on a plane to Evergreen headquarters by the end of the week. He paused, then added, and I want Mrs. Santos on that task force. Maria's eyes went wide. Me? But I don't know anything about task forces. You know more than you think, Mr. Thompson said. You've been watching this company for 23 years. You see things we don't see. That's exactly what we need. The meeting continued for another hour. Maria stayed, listening as the executives discussed plans and assigned responsibilities. It was strange to be part of the conversation instead of just overhearing it. Strange, but also wonderful. When the meeting finally ended, people started gathering their things and heading for the door. Several executives stopped to shake Maria's hand or thank her for speaking up. Even Mr. Chun, who had seemed annoyed at first, came over to talk to her. I'm sorry if I was dismissive, he said. You were right about the packaging. I should have listened to the customer feedback more carefully. It's okay, Maria said. We all miss things sometimes. The important thing is that we fix them. Mrs. Parker walked Maria back to the elevator. That was very brave. What you did today, the HR director said, most people would have stayed quiet. Maria shrugged. I love this company! I couldn't just watch it fail without trying to help. That's exactly why we need people like you, Mrs. Parker said. You care. And caring is something that can't be taught in business school. As Maria rode the elevator back down to her office in the basement, she felt a strange mix of emotions. She was proud of what she had done, but she was also nervous about what came next. Being on a task force was not like mopping floors. There would be meetings and reports and expectations. Could she really do this? But then she remembered what Mr. Brightfield had written in his notes. Every big success starts with a small step. Don't be afraid to take that step. The fear is always worse than the reality. Maria smiled to herself. The old man had been wise. And maybe, just maybe, she was a little wise too. She went back to work, checking on her cleaning staff and making sure everything was running smoothly. But she carried herself differently now. She walked a little taller. She spoke a little louder. Something had changed inside her, and she knew it would never change back. The invisible woman had finally been seen. Over the next few weeks, Maria's life changed in ways she never could have imagined. She was invited to meetings, real meetings where decisions were made and strategies were discussed. At first, she felt out of place, sitting among people with fancy titles and expensive clothes. But slowly, she began to find her voice. The task force that Mr. Thompson had created met twice a week. Maria was there for every meeting, sitting quietly at first, listening and learning. But when she had something to say, she said it. And people listened. The first victory came with the packaging redesign. Maria had suggested bringing in actual workers who used the products every day to test the new designs. The company hired a group of hotel housekeepers, hospital janitors, and school custodians to spend a day trying out different containers. The results were exactly what Maria had predicted. The workers overwhelmingly preferred simpler, easier to open containers, even if they were slightly more expensive to produce. They showed the engineers exactly where the problems were. Problems that were invisible in a laboratory, but obvious in a real cleaning closet. Mr. Chun, to his credit, accepted the feedback gracefully. He worked with his team to create a new container design that combined the best of the old and new approaches. It was easy to open, easy to pour, and didn't clog. The cost was slightly higher. But Mr. Thompson approved it without hesitation. We've been penny wise and pound foolish. The CEO said in one meeting, "We saved a few cents on packaging and cost ourselves millions and lost customer trust." The second victory came with communication. Mr. Torres, the operations chief, implemented a new policy requiring customer service representatives to call any customer whose order was delayed by more than 12 hours. At first, the representatives complained that they didn't have time for extra calls. But Maria had an idea. "When you mop a floor, you don't wait for the dirt to pile up," she said. "You clean it a little bit at a time, so it never becomes a big problem." The same thing works with customers. A quick call takes 2 minutes. Dealing with an angry customer who found out too late takes 20 minutes. Which one saves more time? Mr. Torres implemented Maria's approach, and within a month, customer complaints about delivery had dropped by 60%. The representatives found that customers were actually grateful for the calls, even when the news was bad. It felt good to give people a chance to plan, to adjust, to feel respected. The third victory was the biggest one. A team was sent to visit Evergreen's headquarters, just as Maria had suggested. But there was a surprise. Mr. Thompson decided that Maria should be part of that team. "You understand what we're trying to do better than anyone," he told her. "I want you there to see how Evergreen works and to help us understand what they really need." Maria was terrified. She had never flown on an airplane before. She had never stayed in a hotel room. She had never done anything like this. But she agreed because she knew it was important. The trip to Evergreen was Maria walked through their warehouses and talked to their workers. She watched how they unpacked shipments and stored products on shelves. She asked questions that the executives would never have thought to ask. One conversation stuck with her. She was talking to a warehouse supervisor, a middle-aged man named Tom, who had worked at Evergreen for 15 years. "The thing about Brightfield," Tom said, "is that you used to feel like partners." The old sales rep, before he retired, would come by every month just to chat. He'd bring donuts and ask how things were going. If we had a problem, he'd get it fixed. "Now, we only hear from you when you want something, or when there's a problem you can't ignore." Maria brought this feedback back to the team. "We've forgotten how to be good neighbors," she said. "We send emails and reports, but we don't visit. We analyze data, but we don't talk to real people. Evergreen isn't just a customer. They're a partner. And partners need to spend time together." The Evergreen team, including their CEO, was impressed by Maria. They had expected slick executives with rehearsed presentations. Instead, they met a humble woman who actually understood their daily challenges. She didn't use fancy business language. She talked about cleaning closets and storage rooms and the workers who use the products every day. "This is what we've been missing," the Evergreen CEO said at the end of the visit. "Someone who gets it. Someone who sees the work, not just the numbers." When the team returned to Brightfield, negotiations with Evergreen took on a new tone. Instead of fighting over price, both companies worked together to solve real problems. Brightfield agreed to improve packaging and communication. Evergreen agreed to extend the contract for 5 more years with only a modest price reduction. It was a victory for everyone, and everyone at Brightfield knew that Maria Santos, the woman who cleaned floors, had made it possible. But the story did not end there. Something bigger was happening, something that would change not just Maria's life, but the entire culture of the company. Mr. Thompson called another company-wide meeting. This time in the large auditorium on the first floor. Every employee was invited, from executives to janitors. Maria sat near the back, her old habit of being invisible still hard to break. 6 months ago, Mr. Thompson began, this company was in crisis. We were about to lose our biggest customer. Our stock price was falling. People were talking about layoffs and cutbacks. He paused and looked out at the audience. Today, I'm happy to report that we have turned things around. Evergreen has renewed their contract. Our customer satisfaction scores are higher than they've been in years. And we're on track for record profits this quarter. Applause filled the auditorium. Maria clapped along with everyone else, happy that the company she loved was doing well. But I didn't bring you here just to share good news. Mr. Thompson continued. I brought you here to share a lesson. And that lesson has a name. Maria Santos. Maria froze in her seat. She felt hundreds of eyes turning toward her. Many of you don't know Maria, Mr. Thompson said. She's been with this company for 23 years. She started as a janitor and worked her way up to head of facilities. For most of that time, she was invisible to the leadership team. We walked past her in the hallways without noticing. We held meetings behind closed doors and never thought to include her. He shook his head. That was our mistake, because Maria knew things that we didn't know. She understood problems that we couldn't see. And when she finally got the chance to speak, she told us exactly what we needed to hear. Mr. Thompson described the meeting. When Maria had spoken up on the ideas she had shared, he talked about the task force and the trip to Evergreen. He gave credit where credit was due. Maria didn't have a fancy degree or a big title, Mr. Thompson said. She had something better. She had experience, wisdom, and the courage to speak up when it mattered. She reminded us that the best ideas don't always come from the top. Sometimes they come from the people who are closest to the work. He smiled and looked directly at Maria, proud to announce that Maria Santos has been promoted to a new position. She will be our Chief Experience Officer, responsible for ensuring that we never lose touch with our customers or our workers again. The auditorium erupted in applause. People stood up. Maria felt tears running down her cheeks. She had never expected this. She had never asked for recognition or reward. She had just done what she thought was right. After the meeting, dozens of people came to congratulate Maria. Workers she had known for years hugged her and told her how proud they were. Executives shook her hand and promised to work closely with her in her new role. But the moment that meant the most came later, when she was alone in her office, now located on the executive floor instead of in the basement. There was a knock on the door, and Mrs. Parker came in. I wanted to give you something, the HR director said. She handed Maria a framed photograph. Maria looked at it and gasped. It was a picture of Mr. Harold Brightfield, the founder, standing in front of the very first Brightfield factory. He was a young man in the photo, with a wide smile and hopeful eyes. I found this in the archives, Mrs. Parker said. I thought you should have it! Since you're the one who kept his spirit alive all these years. Maria held the photograph close to her heart. Thank you, she whispered. This means more than I can say. Mrs. Parker smiled. No, Maria, thank you for reminding us who we're supposed to be. After Mrs. Parker left, Maria sat in her new office and looked around. It was bigger than her old apartment, with windows that looked out over the city. She had a beautiful wooden desk and comfortable chairs for guests. There was even a small sofa for when she needed to rest. But what she treasured most was the photograph of Mr. Brightfield, now hanging on the wall where she could see it every day. And next to it, she hung another photograph, one of her parents, two simple people who had worked hard their whole lives and taught her to do the same. Maria picked up the phone and called her daughter. "Mia," she said, "you're not going to believe what happened today." As she told the story, Maria felt a warmth spreading through her chest. It was the warmth of pride, of accomplishment, of a life well lived. She had spent 23 years being invisible. Now, finally, people could see her. And what they saw was not just a cleaning lady. They saw a teacher, a leader, and a reminder that wisdom comes from many places, if only we have the courage to listen. The days and weeks that followed Maria's promotion were some of the most challenging and rewarding of her life. Being Chief Experience Officer was nothing like running the facilities department. Instead of managing cleaning schedules and repair orders, she now spent her days in meetings, reviewing customer feedback, and developing new programs to improve how the company treated people. At first, Maria felt like a fish out of water. She did not know how to use the fancy presentation software. She struggled with the business terminology that everyone else used so easily. She felt embarrassed when she had to ask basic questions that everyone else seemed to already know the answers to. But Maria was a quick learner. She always had been. And she had one advantage that no one else in the company could match. She understood the real work, the actual daily tasks that employees performed and customers experienced. She knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be ignored, to have good ideas that no one would listen to. Her first major initiative was something she called the listening program. Once a month, every executive in the company would spend a day doing a frontline job. They would stock shelves in the warehouse, answer phones and customer service, or ride along with delivery drivers. The goal was simple. Make sure the leaders understood what the workers experienced. Many executives resisted the idea at first. They said they were too busy, that they had more important things to do. But Mr. Thompson backed Maria completely. If we're too important to understand our own business, then we're not doing our jobs, the CEO said. Everyone participates. No exceptions. The first listening day was chaotic. Mr. Chun, the product development VP, spent a day in the packaging warehouse and returned exhausted and humbled. Mrs. Wells, the CFO, answered customer service calls and was shocked by how frustrated many callers were. Mr. Torres, who ran operations, rode along with a delivery driver and discovered problems with the route scheduling software that his own reports had never mentioned. After each listening day, Maria gathered the executives for a discussion. They shared what they had learned, what had surprised them, and what they thought should change. The conversations were often difficult. Executives had to admit that their policies and decisions had unintended consequences. They had to face the gap between how they imagined the company worked and how it actually worked. But slowly, things began to change. Problems that had been ignored for years finally got attention. Workers who had felt voiceless began to speak up. The whole culture of the company started to shift. Maria also started a program for frontline workers, giving them a direct channel to share ideas and concerns with leadership. She called it the Voice Program. Any employee could submit a suggestion or complaint, and Maria personally reviewed every single one. The best ideas were implemented, and the people who suggested them were recognized and rewarded. One of the first voice submissions came from a young man named Carlos who worked in the shipping department. He had noticed that the company was using too much packaging material, which was wasteful and made boxers harder to handle. He suggested a simpler packing method that would save money and reduce waste. Maria brought the idea to the task force. Mr. Torres, who would have dismissed the suggestion before his own listening day experience, now took it seriously. A pilot program was started, and within 3 months, the company was saving over $100,000 per year on packaging costs. Carlos received a bonus and a promotion. Stories like this spread through the company. Workers began to believe that their voices mattered. They stopped keeping good ideas to themselves and started sharing them freely. The company became a better place to work, and as a result, it became a better company overall. Maria's approach also spread outside the company. Other businesses heard about what Brightfield was doing and asked for advice. Maria gave speeches at conferences and was featured in business magazines. She became known as the Cleaning Lady CEO, a title she wore with pride. One interviewer asked her what the secret of her success was. Maria thought for a moment before answering. "I don't think there's a secret," she said. "I just paid attention. I noticed things that other people ignored. I listened when other people talked. And when I finally had the chance to speak, I said what I believed was true." She paused, then added, "I think everyone has that ability. We all see things that others don't see. We all have ideas that could make the world better. The question is whether we have the courage to share them, and whether anyone has the wisdom to listen." 1 year after Maria's promotion, Brightfield Industries held a special celebration. It was the company's 50th anniversary, and the occasion was marked with a grand party at a fancy hotel downtown. All employees were invited, along with customers, partners, and members of the media. Maria wore a beautiful dress that her daughter had helped her pick out. It was the first time in her life she had worn something so elegant. She felt a little silly at first, but her grandchildren told her she looked like a movie star, and that made her smile. The highlight of the evening was a speech by Mr. Thompson. He talked about the company's history, its challenges, and its future. But the biggest part of his speech was about Maria. 50 years ago, Harold Brightfield started this company with a simple idea. Mr. Thompson said, he believed that if you treated people right, if you listened to them and solved their problems, success would follow. Over the years, we forgot that lesson. We got too big, too complicated, too focused on numbers instead of people. He looked at Maria, who was sitting at the head table. 1 year ago, a woman named Maria Santos reminded us of what we had forgotten. She wasn't an executive or a consultant. She was the head of facilities, the woman who made sure our buildings were clean and our pipes didn't leak. But she understood our business better than anyone in the boardroom. Mr. Thompson held up a plaque. Tonight, I'm proud to present Maria Santos with the Harold Brightfield Award for Excellence. This award is given to the person who best represents the values and vision of our founder, and I can't think of anyone who deserves it more. Maria walked to the podium to accept the award. The room erupted in applause. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people she had worked with for so many years, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. I don't have a long speech prepared, Maria said. I'm not good at fancy words. But I want to say thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that a simple woman could have something important to say. She held up the plaque. This award has Mr. Brightfield's name on it, and I'm honored to receive it. But I want to dedicate it to all the other invisible people in this company and in companies everywhere. The janitors and security guards, the receptionists and warehouse workers, the people who keep things running but rarely get noticed. Her voice grew stronger. You matter. Your ideas matter. Your experience matters. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you're not important enough to speak. Because sometimes the most important voices are the ones that no one expects to hear. She stepped back from the microphone, and the applause was the loudest of the night. People stood up and cheered. Maria saw tears on many faces, and she felt tears on her own. After the ceremony, Maria was surrounded by well-wishers. Executives shook her hand. Workers hugged her. Reporters asked for interviews. It was overwhelming, but Maria handled it with the same grace and humility she had shown all her life. Later that night, when the party was winding down, Maria found a quiet corner and sat by herself for a moment. She looked at the plaque in her hands and thought about her journey. 24 years ago, she had walked into this company as a 19-year-old girl with nothing but a high school diploma and a willingness to work hard. She had cleaned toilets and mopped floors. She had been ignored and overlooked. She had watched younger people with fancier credentials rise past her while she stayed in the same place. But she had never stopped learning. She had never stopped paying attention. She had never stopped believing that her experience and wisdom had value, even if no one else seemed to think so. And now, here she was. Chief Experience Officer. Award winner. A voice that people actually listened to. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. More than she had ever thought possible. Maria looked up and saw her daughter and grandchildren walking toward her. They had come to the party to celebrate with her, and seeing their faces filled her with joy. Grandma, you were amazing! Her youngest grandchild, a 7-year-old girl named Sophia, said, "You're like a superhero." Maria laughed and pulled Sophia onto her lap. "I'm not a superhero, Mia. I'm just a woman who cleaned floors and paid attention." "But that's what makes you a superhero," Sophia said. "You helped people when nobody else could." Maria hugged her granddaughter tight and felt tears prick her eyes again. Out of the mouths of babes, she thought. Sometimes children understand things that adults have forgotten. The months that followed the anniversary celebration were good ones for Maria and for Brightfield Industries. The company continued to grow and prosper. Customer satisfaction remained high. Employee morale was the best it had been in years. But Maria knew that success was not a destination. It was a journey that never ended. There would always be new challenges, new problems to solve, new voices to hear. She continued her work with dedication and humility. She still arrived at work early every morning and left late every evening. She still walked through every floor of the building, talking to workers and listening to their concerns. She still read every voice submission and responded personally to as many as she could. Some things had changed, though. She now had a staff of her own, a team of people who helped her manage the experience programs. She had an expense account and a company car. She attended fancy dinners and gave speeches at conferences around the world. But Maria never forgot where she came from. She kept the photograph of Mr. Brightfield on her wall and looked at it every day. She kept a mother's gold cross around her neck and touched it whenever she needed courage. She kept the memories of all those years of hard work and invisibility close to her heart. Because those memories reminded her why she did what she did. She worked not for the money or the recognition, but for the people. For the workers who deserved to be heard. For the customers who deserved to be respected. For the company that had been her home for more than half her life. 2 years after her promotion, Maria received news that changed everything. Mr. Thompson announced that he was retiring. He had led the company through its crisis and its recovery, and now he felt it was time to pass the torch to someone new. There was much speculation about who would become the next CEO. Many names were mentioned, mostly young executives with impressive resumes and ambitious plans. But one name surprised everyone. Maria Santos. At first, Maria thought it was a joke. How could she, a woman who had started as a janitor, become the CEO of a global corporation? It was impossible, ridiculous, beyond anything she had ever imagined. But Mr. Thompson was serious. You're the heart and soul of this company, he told her. You understand our values better than anyone. You connect with people at every level. You're exactly what we need. The board of directors agreed. After a careful search and evaluation, they offered Maria the position of chief executive officer. Maria took 3 days to think about it. She talked to her family, her friends, and her priest. She prayed and reflected and wrestled with her doubts. Could she really do this? Was she ready for such enormous responsibility? In the end, she decided to say yes. Not because she was certain she could succeed, but because she believed in the mission. Brightfield Industries had given her so much over the years. Now, it was her turn to give back everything she had. On the day of her inauguration as CEO, Maria stood in the same auditorium where Mr. Thompson had first announced her promotion. The room was packed with employees, reporters, and guests. Cameras flashed and voices murmured. Maria walked to the podium and looked out at the crowd. She saw familiar faces everywhere. Workers she had known for decades. Executives she had learned from and worked with. Young employees just starting their careers, looking at her with hope and admiration. When I was 19 years old, Maria began. I walked into this building for the first time. I was scared and nervous and had no idea what the future would hold. All I had was a mop and a bucket and a willingness to work hard. She smiled. Today, I stand before you as the CEO of this company. It's a journey I never could have predicted, never could have planned. But it's a journey that taught me something important. Something I want to share with all of you. She paused and looked around the room. Every person in this company matters. Every voice deserves to be heard. Every idea has the potential to change everything. It doesn't matter what your title is or where your desk is located. What matters is that you care about your work and the people you serve. Maria held up the Harold Brightfield Award, which she had brought with her to the podium. Mr. Brightfield started this company with a simple principle. Listen to people. Solve their problems. Treat them with respect. That principle made us successful 50 years ago, and it will make us successful for the next 50 years. She put down the award and looked directly into the cameras. My promise to you is this. As long as I am CEO, this company will never forget its values. We will never become so big that we stop listening. We will never become so successful that we stop caring. We will always remember that our greatest strength is not our products or our profits. It's our people. The applause that followed was thunderous. People cheered and cried and hugged each other. Maria felt the warmth of their love and support washing over her like a wave. She had come so far from that scared 19-year-old girl with a mop and a bucket. But in some ways, she was still the same person. Still humble, still hardworking, still paying attention to the things that others ignored. The invisible woman had become the leader of the company, but she would never forget what it felt like to be invisible. And she would spend the rest of her career making sure that no one else at Brightfield ever felt that way again. Maria Santos had proven something that the world often forgot. That wisdom comes in many forms. That the best leaders are often those who have worked at the bottom. That a simple woman with simple knowledge can turn everything around if only someone gives her the chance to speak. And now, with that chance firmly in her grasp, she was ready to lead our company into a future brighter than anyone had ever imagined.